Hi, my name is Emily Mueller, and this is an insight into the life and contributions of Carl Rogers. Okay, for a brief overview of Carl Rogers and humanistic psychology, Carl Rogers was an American psychologist. He lived from 1902 to 1987. He was recognized as an important founder of humanistic psychology. Humanistic psychology takes a unique approach in addressing human nature as inherently good. This field shifts the focus from external factors shaping an individual to internal development. Humanistic psychology serves as a contrast to behavioral and psychoanalytic approaches. The developments of Carl Rogers had a lasting impact of understanding and actualizing the self in application to therapy approaches. Three main developments that I will discuss by Carl Rogers within this presentation are unconditional positive regard, the fully functioning person, and person-centered therapy. I've provided three of my favorite quotes by Carl Rogers that give a good idea of what he stood for as a person. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. The good life is a process, not a state of being. It is a direction, not a destination. We think we listen, but very rarely do we listen with real understanding, true empathy. Yet listening of this very special kind is one of the most potent forces for change that I know. This is his early adolescence and family background. He was born in 1902 in the suburbs of Oak Park, Illinois. Carl Rogers was born into a large family of 6 children. However, he significantly experienced a sense of isolation due to strict religious values placed upon him growing up. In 1914, he moved to a rural farm with his family where he acquired an interest in agricultural processes and the scientific method. His early childhood experiences were reflected in his later career years, in which others described him as a loner or a social recluse. This is his background in education. In 1919, following his interest in agricultural processes, he began his studies as an agriculture major at the University of Wisconsin. In 1922, 3 years later, he switched his studies to ministry and attends a 6-month Christian conference in China. 1924, upon graduating the University of Wisconsin, he strives to become a clergyman and attends the Union Theology Seminary of New York. In 1926 to 1931, he decides to change his path once again and receives his PhD in clinical psychology at Columbia University. This is his career life after education. Upon obtaining his PhD, he had begun clinical work in New York and worked with children from unfortunate circumstances who lacked support. In 1940, he switched clinical paths to becoming a psychology professor at Ohio State University. This period was essential in his developments of person-centered therapy and unconditional positive regard. In 1947 to 1957, he moved his teachings to the University of Chicago and additionally made developments within the counseling center. In 1964, he worked in the Western Behavioral Science Institute in California to apply his therapy approaches to other world events, which consisted of religious conflicts. Okay, these are the self-discoveries of Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers experienced self-revelations throughout his educational and career journey that shaped his contributions to psychology. The first was during his 6-month Christian conference in China in 1922. This was his first detachment from the ideologies of his parents, in which he discovered that every individual, including himself, must focus on their own experiential learning and independent thinking. The second is discovering his own feelings of self-worth in 1945 to 1957. While teaching and counseling at the University of Chicago, he was faced with feelings of self-doubt and inadequacy, which caused him to isolate himself in a cabin for 6 months and reflect, as well as going to therapy himself. And then his third was that real learning is derived from experiences in 1964. And then Carl Rogers wrote a criticism statement regarding graduate education in psychology, claiming that students were not allowed to experience learning on their own and were tied down to pre-written facts. Okay, for his first development, unconditional positive regard. Carl Rogers believed that the ability to obtain a self-concept was comprised of the need to feel accepted by others. Rogers developed the concept of unconditional positive regard to satisfy this underlying need. Unconditional positive regard eliminates the barriers of judgment and involves offering individuals with a complete empathetic approach and acceptance. This regard allows for individuals to be accepted as unconditionally human and capable of self-actualization, no matter their behavior. His second development was the concept of the fully functioning person. One major development of Rogers is the ideal objective in self-actualization, which he referred to as the fully functioning person. Carl Rogers developed this concept in response to his understanding of experiential learning, in which an individual develops a self-concept through experience. A fully functioning person is able to perceive every experience without contortion, allow for experiences without feeling as if they are a threat to the self-concept, and a perceived sense of control over choice and self-freedom, as well as accept a continuous state of growth and learning. And then for his most significant development, person-centered therapy. After evaluating existing psychotherapeutic approaches and recording therapy sessions to understand human growth, Rogers developed the concept of person-centered therapy as an approach to psychotherapy. Within the approach, Rogers applied authentic listening and unconditional positive regard in order to provide full acceptance. His ability to listen with authenticity involved taking in his client's perceptions without preceding judgment or fitting into a structure of analysis. In order to eliminate the disconnect, he would refer to individuals as clients instead of the usual patient within therapy. A major takeaway of person-centered therapy is that it does not allow for a dependency on the therapist and instead pushes for individual growth and self-actualization. All right, historical context and significance. Historically, Rogers' developments had existed simultaneously with the stresses derived from the end of World War II in 1945. Rogers had advanced person-centered therapy as a new approach to psychotherapy in the early 1940s, so existing at the same time. The techniques developed by Rogers were easily trainable and did not involve advanced expertise. The end of World War II called for the need for an abundance of therapy resources with the impacted veterans and families. All right, and then here are my reference cited. Thank you.